The stepmother put poison in the millionaire husband's drink, but the son. The Villarreal mansion stood as a testament to wealth and power, its towering arches and sprawling gardens the perfect backdrop to an idyllic life. But behind the ornate facade and opulent interiors, darkness thrived. Gloria, the new lady of the house, moved with practiced grace through its marble halls, her every step calculated, her every word rehearsed. She had married Arturo Villarreal, a wealthy widower, under the guise of love, but her true intentions were buried deep beneath layers of charm and deceit. At first glance, Gloria was the perfect wife. She attended to Arturo with care, orchestrated lavish dinners for his business associates, and ensured that the estate reflected their status. To everyone else, she was a beacon of elegance. But to Ignacio, Arturo's 2-year-old son, she was something far different, a looming shadow, cold and terrifying. Ignacio was just a toddler, his world still forming around him, but he had already learned to fear Gloria. When Arturo was home, she feigned kindness, brushing her fingers gently through Ignacio's soft hair, her smile as sweet as honey. But the moment Arturo's car disappeared down the driveway, her demeanor shifted. Useless, Gloria hissed one morning as Ignacio accidentally knocked over a glass of water. Her eyes, sharp and unforgiving, bore into him as she grabbed his tiny wrist. "You can't even hold a cup properly." The house staff often bore witness to such moments, but fear sealed their lips. Gloria had made it clear that their loyalty lay with her, and anyone who dared to defy her would be sent packing. Even the head maid, who had served the Villarreal family for decades, lowered her eyes when Gloria's voice turned cold. For Ignacio, these moments were his reality. He didn't have the words to explain the terror he felt or the sadness that weighed on him, but it showed in his wide, teary eyes and the way he clung to his toys for comfort. One afternoon, as Gloria's sharp voice echoed through the halls, Arturo returned home unexpectedly. Entering the mansion, he paused, hearing the faint cries of his son. He hurried toward the sound, his footsteps echoing in the long corridor. When he entered the playroom, his heart stopped. Ignacio stood trembling in a corner, tears streaming down his small face. Gloria loomed over him, her arms crossed, her lips curled in disgust. "You'll stay there until you learn to behave," she said sharply, not noticing Arturo's presence. "What's going on here?" Arturo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Gloria spun around, her expression transforming instantly into one of shock and innocence. "Oh, Arturo." He was being difficult again. "I was just teaching him some discipline." Arturo walked past her, kneeling to scoop Ignacio into his arms. The boy buried his face in his father's shoulder, his small hands clutching at Arturo's shirt as if holding on for dear life. For the first time, Arturo noticed how fragile Ignacio felt, how his small body shook with sobs. That night, as Gloria served Arturo his evening drink, she maintained her facade of a loving wife, but Arturo's mind raced with questions. The haunting image of his son in tears lingered, and doubt crept into his thoughts like a slow-moving storm. He sipped his drink, watching Gloria closely, the weight of suspicion settling in his chest. He didn't yet know the depths of her cruelty or the danger she posed, but something inside him whispered that this was only the beginning. The days that followed were a strange blend of normalcy and unease in the Villarreal mansion. Gloria continued to play her role with perfection, doting on Arturo and managing the household with a confident air. But beneath her poised exterior, she was restless. Ignacio's sudden attachment to his father made it harder for her to manipulate the boy, and Arturo's watchful gaze felt sharper than before. One evening, Gloria prepared an elaborate dinner in the grand dining room. The long mahogany table was adorned with crystal glasses, silver candlesticks, and floral arrangements that filled the air with the subtle scent of roses. She moved through the room with grace, ensuring every detail was flawless, though her thoughts were elsewhere. Tonight, she had decided, was the night. Arturo's increasing skepticism had begun to unsettle her, and she couldn't risk waiting any longer. Arturo arrived at the table, holding Ignacio in his arms. The boy had been clingier than usual, refusing to let go of his father's hand even for a moment. "You've outdone yourself, Gloria," Arturo said, his tone polite but distant as he glanced at the extravagant spread. Gloria forced a smile. "Only the best for my family." She turned to one of the maids. "Take Ignacio to the kitchen. He can have his dinner there. Tonight is for adults." Ignacio's grip on Arturo's shirt tightened, and his wide eyes filled with silent panic. Arturo hesitated, but Gloria's insistent gaze left him no choice. "It's okay, pequeño," he whispered, kissing his son's head before handing him to the maid. Ignacio reached out for his father, but the maid gently carried him away, his soft cries fading into the distance. Gloria poured wine into Arturo's glass, her movements deliberate. She reached into her pocket and slipped a few drops of a clear liquid into his drink, stirring it lightly with a practiced hand. She placed the glass in front of him, her smile sweet yet calculated. "You've been working so hard lately," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "You deserve to relax tonight." Arturo picked up the glass, swirling the deep red liquid thoughtfully. Gloria watched him closely, her heart pounding despite her calm demeanor. But before the glass reached his lips, a sound broke the tension. "No, Papa." Everyone in the room froze. Ignacio stood at the doorway, his small frame trembling but his voice steady. "No," he repeated, pointing at the glass in Arturo's hand. Arturo set the glass down, his brow furrowing as he looked at his son. "Ignacio, what's wrong?" The boy didn't have the words to explain, but his tearful eyes locked on Gloria with an intensity beyond his years. Gloria's breath hitched, her carefully crafted mask cracking for a fleeting moment. "He's just being fussy," she said quickly. "Probably tired. Let me." "No!" Ignacio shouted again, this time louder. Arturo rose from his seat, scooping Ignacio into his arms. The boy clung to him, burying his face in his father's shoulder. Arturo's eyes shifted between his son and his wife, suspicion flaring brighter than ever. "It's all right, Ignacio," he murmured, though his voice was laced with unease. Gloria's hands clenched at her sides, but she forced herself to laugh. "It seems he's determined to be the center of attention tonight. Children and their whims, you know how it is." Arturo didn't respond. He held Ignacio tightly, his mind racing. The child's fear wasn't just a whim, it felt like a warning. "I think we're done for tonight," he said, his tone cool as he carried Ignacio out of the dining room. Gloria stood alone at the table, her grip tightening on the edge of the chair. The perfect evening she had planned was falling apart, and Arturo's growing distance was a threat she could no longer ignore. Upstairs, Arturo placed Ignacio on his bed, brushing the boy's hair back gently. "What's wrong, pequeño? Can you tell me?" Ignacio sniffled, his tiny hands gripping Arturo's sleeve. "No drink," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Mama bad." The words sent a chill down Arturo's spine. He stared at the child, his mind replaying Gloria's actions, her insistence on the glass of wine, her coldness toward Ignacio. Something was deeply wrong. As Ignacio drifted to sleep, Arturo returned to the dining room. The glass of wine still sat untouched, glinting in the dim light. He picked it up, his jaw tightening as he walked to his study. This time, he would get answers. The night stretched long as Arturo sent the glass for analysis, the unease in his chest growing heavier with each passing hour. When the results came back confirming his worst fears, he felt the weight of betrayal crash over him. Poison. His wife, the woman he had trusted with his heart and his family, had tried to kill him. But Arturo's fury didn't consume him just yet. Beneath the anger, a quieter emotion took root, resolve. Gloria thought she had the upper hand, but she had underestimated him. Arturo would unravel every lie, uncover every secret, and protect Ignacio at all costs. And Gloria? She would pay for everything. The days following the poisoned wine incident were heavy with a quiet tension that rippled through the Villarreal mansion. Arturo, now acutely aware of the danger that lurked within his own home, began piecing together the truth. Every smile from Gloria felt like a dagger hidden behind silk, every glance a reminder of her betrayal. Ignacio's small but powerful warning replayed in his mind like a distant echo. Gloria, for her part, sensed the shift in Arturo. Though he hadn't confronted her directly, his demeanor had grown colder, his movements more measured. She tried to regain control, her voice syrupy sweet whenever she addressed him, but Arturo only responded with polite indifference. One morning, Arturo pretended to leave for an early meeting, a briefcase in hand and a kiss on Ignacio's forehead. Gloria stood by the door, waving him off with a forced smile. But instead of heading to the city, Arturo circled back and parked his car at a secluded spot near the estate. Hidden by the towering hedges, he watched from a distance as Gloria's true self began to emerge. Inside, Gloria strode through the house with an air of authority. "Get the boy ready," she barked at the maid. "I won't have him sulking around when the investors visit this afternoon." The maid hesitated, her hands trembling. "Señora, Ignacio is still sleeping." "Then wake him up." Gloria snapped, her eyes flashing with irritation. "He's not a prince. He doesn't get special treatment just because his father is too soft to discipline him." Unbeknownst to her, Arturo was silently observing through the large bay windows of his study, which overlooked the east wing of the mansion. The harshness in her voice, the maid's visible fear, and the faint cries of Ignacio that followed were like shards piercing Arturo's heart. Gloria's treatment of his son wasn't a mere fluke, it was a pattern. Arturo clenched his fists, his rage simmering beneath the surface. For months, he had ignored the subtle signs, blinded by his trust in her, but now the veil had been lifted. That evening, Arturo confronted one of the senior staff members who had been with the family for years. Maria, the head maid, stood in the corner of his study, her hands twisting nervously in her apron. "Maria," Arturo began, his voice low but firm, "I need the truth. What's been happening here while I've been away? How has Gloria been treating Ignacio?" Maria's eyes darted toward the door as if expecting Gloria to burst in at any moment. "Señor," she said hesitantly, "I didn't want to meddle, but Ignacio, he's been suffering." Arturo's chest tightened. "Suffering how?" "She yells at him when you're not here," Maria confessed, her voice cracking. "Sometimes, she locks him in his room if he spills something or makes noise. The boy is terrified of her, but he doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to upset you." Arturo's breath caught. His son, barely 2 years old, had been enduring such cruelty in silence. The weight of his guilt was almost unbearable. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Maria lowered her gaze. "We were scared, Señor." She made it clear that anyone who went against her would be dismissed. "For many of us, this job is everything." Arturo nodded, understanding but furious. "Thank you, Maria. You don't need to be afraid anymore. I'll handle this." That night, Arturo sat by Ignacio's bedside, watching the boy sleep. His small chest rose and fell with each breath, his hand clutching a tiny stuffed bear. Arturo gently ran a hand over his son's hair, a lump forming in his throat. "I'm so sorry, Ignacio," he whispered. "I should have protected you." Ignacio stirred slightly, his small fingers reaching out to grab Arturo's hand. Even in his sleep, the child sought comfort, trust unbroken despite the pain he had endured. Arturo's resolve hardened. He wouldn't let this continue. Gloria had crossed a line, and her actions had not only endangered him but broken the innocence of a child. He needed proof to ensure she faced justice, not just for him, but for Ignacio. The next morning, Arturo set his plan into motion. He arranged for a private investigator to install discreet cameras in key areas of the mansion. Every hallway, every common room, and even the kitchen, nowhere would Gloria's actions go unnoticed. Arturo wanted undeniable evidence of her cruelty. As days passed, the recordings painted a clearer picture of the torment Ignacio faced. Gloria's sharp words, the way she jerked his arm when he spilled milk, the hours she forced him to sit in silence as punishment for minor mistakes. It was all there, undeniable and damning. One evening, Arturo watched a particularly painful clip. Ignacio was sitting on the floor of the playroom, building a small tower with blocks. Gloria entered, her heels clicking against the tiles. Without warning, she kicked the blocks, sending them scattering across the room. "This is why you'll never be good enough," she hissed. "You can't even build a proper tower." Ignacio didn't cry. He simply picked up the blocks, his small hands trembling, and began stacking them again. Arturo slammed his fist against the desk, his fury spilling over. He had seen enough. Armed with the recordings, Arturo prepared for the confrontation. But he wouldn't act alone. He contacted his lawyer, his closest business partners, and even a trusted detective. If Gloria thought she could manipulate her way out of this, she was wrong. That night, as Gloria prepared for yet another lavish dinner, Arturo stood in the shadows of the dining room, watching her orchestrate the staff. The table was set, the wine was poured, but this time, the stage was his to command. Gloria turned to him with her practiced smile. "Darling, you're just in time. Everything is ready." Arturo stepped forward, his expression unyielding. "Yes, Gloria. Everything is ready." His voice was calm, but beneath it, there was a storm waiting to be unleashed. For the first time, Gloria's confidence faltered. She had no idea what was coming. The grand dining room gleamed under the warm light of the chandelier, each crystal prism catching and refracting the glow like fragments of a dream. The table, laden with polished silverware and china, seemed to reflect the perfection Gloria always sought to portray. But tonight, it would become the stage for her downfall. Gloria moved through the room with her usual air of confidence, giving orders to the staff, her sharp eyes inspecting every detail. "Make sure the wine is at the right temperature," she said with a clipped tone. "And no mistakes with the plating tonight." Arturo watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. In his hand was a small black device, a tablet connected to the hidden cameras he had installed. Inside it were hours of evidence, each clip a damning strike against the woman he had once trusted with his family. Tonight, there would be no escape for Gloria. Their guests began to arrive, laughter and polite conversation filling the room as old friends and business partners greeted one another. Gloria's charm was on full display, her smile dazzling as she floated from one guest to another. She took Arturo's arm as they mingled, leaning in just enough to seem affectionate. "You've been so quiet lately," she murmured, her voice sweet as honey. "Is everything all right, my love?" Arturo turned to her, his smile tight. "Everything is perfect, Gloria. Absolutely perfect." The tension in his words made her falter for just a second, but she quickly recovered, brushing it off as if it were nothing. As the dinner began, Arturo stood at the head of the table, raising his glass for a toast. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. "I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight," he began, his voice calm and measured. "This gathering is special, not just because we are among friends, but because it marks a turning point for my family." Gloria beamed, lifting her own glass, ready to bask in the praise she assumed was coming her way. But Arturo's next words froze her in place. "For a long time, I believed my home was safe. I believed my son was loved and cared for. But I've come to realize that appearances can be deceiving." He set his glass down, his gaze locking onto Gloria. "Sometimes, even the people closest to us hide secrets so dark, they threaten to destroy everything we hold dear." The guests exchanged confused glances, murmurs rippling across the table. Gloria's smile wavered, but she held her composure. "Darling," she said with a nervous laugh, "what are you talking about?" Arturo didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and retrieved a small remote. With a press of a button, a screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The lights dimmed, and the murmurs turned into gasps as footage began to play. On the screen, Gloria's true nature was exposed in stark clarity. The guests watched in horror as the videos showed her shouting at Ignacio, yanking him by the arm, and locking him in his room. Her venomous words filled the room. "You're worthless, stop crying like a baby, your father spoils you too much." Each clip was a blow, shattering the image of the perfect wife and mother she had worked so hard to cultivate. Arturo's voice cut through the stunned silence. "This is the woman I trusted with my son. The woman who claimed to love this family." Gloria shot to her feet, her face pale and her hands trembling. This is ridiculous. It's a manipulation, some trick to make me look bad." Arturo ignored her protests, turning the tablet so everyone could see the timestamps on the footage. "These are from the cameras I had installed after Ignacio's warnings. You've been caught, Gloria. There's no use denying it." The guests began to murmur again, their shock giving way to anger and disgust. One of Arturo's business partners, a longtime friend, spoke up. "How could you do this, Gloria? To a child, no less." Another guest added, "Arturo, you have to report this. She's dangerous." Gloria's facade crumbled. Her once confident demeanor dissolved into desperation as she realized the walls were closing in. She turned to Arturo, her voice frantic. "Please, Arturo. I made mistakes, yes, but I was just trying to discipline him. You don't understand, raising a child isn't easy." Arturo's expression hardened. "Discipline? Locking a 2-year-old in a room? Poisoning my drink? That's not discipline, Gloria. That's cruelty." Gasps filled the room at his mention of poison. Arturo pulled out the lab report confirming the presence of toxins in the wine. "I know about your plan to get rid of me, to take the fortune and leave my son without a father. But you underestimated me, Gloria. You underestimated Ignacio." At that moment, the doors to the dining room opened, and 2 police officers entered. Gloria's eyes widened as they approached her. "Gloria Villarreal," one of them said, "you are under arrest for attempted murder and child endangerment." "No. You can't do this," Gloria shrieked, struggling as they placed handcuffs on her wrists. "Arturo, please. Don't let them take me. I did this for us." Arturo stepped back, his voice steady. "You didn't do anything for us. You did it for yourself. And now, you'll face the consequences." The room fell silent as the officers led Gloria away, her protests echoing faintly down the halls. The guests remained in their seats, the weight of what they had witnessed settling over them. Arturo sat down, his hands trembling slightly. One of his friends placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Arturo." But Arturo didn't feel relief, only a deep ache in his chest as he thought of Ignacio. Rising from the table, he excused himself and made his way to his son's room. Ignacio was already asleep, his small figure curled up under a blanket. Arturo knelt beside him, brushing a gentle hand over his hair. "It's over, pequeño," he whispered. "She won't hurt you anymore." As he watched his son sleep, Arturo made a silent promise. From now on, Ignacio would grow up in a home filled with love and protection. No more shadows. No more lies. Just the truth, and a new beginning. The Villarreal mansion stood quiet in the early hours of the morning, its grand halls bathed in the soft, golden light of sunrise. The chaos of the previous night had faded, leaving behind a palpable stillness that felt more like a fragile peace. Arturo sat in the study, his elbows resting on the heavy oak desk, his face buried in his hands. The events of the dinner replayed in his mind like an unending loop, every detail sharp and vivid. It was over. Gloria was gone, taken into custody and facing charges for her crimes. Yet, Arturo couldn't shake the lingering ache in his chest. Despite her betrayals, there had been a time when he had believed in her, when he had thought she could fill the void in his family. The weight of that broken trust was almost unbearable. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse. The door creaked open, and Maria, the head maid, stepped inside. She carried a tray with a cup of tea and a small plate of biscuits. "Senor," she said gently, placing the tray on the desk. "I thought you might need this." Arturo looked up, managing a faint smile. "Thank you, Maria." She hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "You did the right thing, Senor. For Ignacio. For yourself. The house feels lighter now." Arturo nodded, his gaze shifting to the window. Outside, the gardens stretched out in vibrant greens and bursts of color, a stark contrast to the shadows that had once haunted this home. "Lighter," he repeated softly. "I hope Ignacio feels that too." Upstairs, Ignacio sat on his bed, his small hands clutching his favorite stuffed bear. He was quiet, his wide eyes gazing out the window as if searching for something. The room, once a space where he had felt trapped, now felt oddly empty. Arturo entered, his footsteps soft on the carpet. "Good morning, pequeño," he said, kneeling beside his son. Ignacio turned to him, his lips curling into a tentative smile. "Morning, Papa." Arturo reached out, brushing a lock of hair from Ignacio's forehead. "How are you feeling?" The boy hesitated, his small fingers fidgeting with the bear's ear. "Is she gone?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Arturo's chest tightened. He placed a reassuring hand on Ignacio's shoulder. "Yes, she's gone. She can't hurt you anymore." Ignacio's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. Instead, he leaned into his father's embrace, his tiny arms wrapping around Arturo's neck. "I'm glad," he murmured. Arturo held him close, his heart swelling with both relief and determination. "From now on, Ignacio, it's just us. I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make this a happy home again." The days that followed were filled with quiet changes. Arturo began spending more time with Ignacio, taking him on walks through the gardens, reading him bedtime stories, and even sitting with him during meals, something Gloria had often discouraged. The boys' laughter, once rare and fleeting, began to fill the house, each giggle a small victory. One afternoon, Arturo brought Ignacio to his office. On the desk sat a collection of framed photographs, most of them of his late wife and Ignacio as a baby. "I want to show you something," Arturo said, lifting one of the frames. "This is your mama," he said, pointing to a smiling woman with soft features and kind eyes. "She loved you very much. She would have been so proud of the brave boy you are." Ignacio studied the photo intently, his small hand reaching out to touch it. "She looks nice," he said. "She was," Arturo replied, his voice filled with warmth. "And she taught me something very important: family is about love and protection. I forgot that for a while, but I'll never forget it again." Ignacio looked up at his father, his expression thoughtful. "You protect me now, right, Papa?" Arturo's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He knelt to meet his son's gaze, placing both hands on his small shoulders. "Always, Ignacio. Always." Months passed, and the Villarreal mansion transformed. The oppressive air that had once hung over it was replaced with an atmosphere of hope and renewal. Arturo made changes to the household staff, ensuring that everyone who remained truly cared for Ignacio and his well-being. The once formal halls were now filled with laughter and warmth, the echoes of a family finding its way back to happiness. But Arturo's resolve didn't stop there. He worked closely with his lawyers and the authorities to ensure that Gloria faced justice for her actions. The court case was swift and decisive, with the overwhelming evidence ensuring her conviction. Arturo attended every hearing, not out of spite, but to ensure closure, for himself, for Ignacio, and for the family he was rebuilding. Gloria's sentencing made headlines, but Arturo refused to let the scandal define their lives. Instead, he focused on what truly mattered, giving Ignacio the childhood he deserved. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Arturo and Ignacio sat on the steps of the garden terrace. Ignacio held a small kite in his hands, a gift Arturo had surprised him with that morning. "Can we fly it tomorrow?" Ignacio asked, his voice filled with excitement. "Of course," Arturo replied, ruffling his son's hair. "We can do whatever you want, pequeño." Ignacio grinned, leaning against his father's side. For the first time in a long while, Arturo felt a sense of peace. The weight of the past had lifted, leaving behind the promise of brighter days ahead. As they sat together, watching the first stars appear in the sky, Arturo made another silent promise to cherish every moment, to protect the bond they had rebuilt, and to ensure that the Villarreal mansion would always be a place of love and light. For Ignacio, for himself, and for the memory of the woman who had taught him the meaning of family.